Kia Stokes drives her knee directly into Caitlin Clark's quad, while the nearest official has a clear view of the play, and no foul is called. Clark slowly limps back on defense, and her expression says everything. It isn't just physical discomfort anymore. You can see the frustration building with every possession. Moments later, she's visibly arguing with referee Gerda Gatling. By the time she reaches the post-game press conference, she's openly criticizing both the officiating and expressing frustration that also touches on Stephanie White. Stay with me, because we're going through every controversial no call involving Clark, the questionable whistles against Aliyah Boston, and why many fans believe this game could become a turning point in Clark's relationship with the Indiana Fever after her emotional reaction following the loss to the Golden State Valkyries. Do you think Caitlin Clark should remain with the Indiana Fever, or would a fresh start be better? Share your thoughts in the comments below. On one sequence, Clark aggressively attacks the basket, fights through contact, and still manages to secure possession before finishing the play. She clearly believes she deserves a whistle, and judging by the crowd's reaction, many fans felt the same way. As she gets back on her feet, however, it's obvious something isn't right. She's noticeably slow returning up the floor, not because of a lack of effort, because she's struggling to move comfortably. Then came one of the game's most talked about moments. Early in the second quarter, Kia Stokes' knee makes contact with Caitlin Clark's quad during a drive to the basket. The closest referee is only a few feet away, with an unobstructed view of the collision. Yet play continues. No foul, no stoppage, no trip to the free throw line. The game simply moves on, as though nothing significant happened, despite one of the league's biggest stars clearly reacting to the contact in front of thousands inside the arena and a national television audience. The broadcast replay only fueled more discussion. Commentators pointed out Clark's reaction after the play, noting that while Veronica Burton was defending her, Clark collided with Stokes before ending up on the floor. As she stood, the cameras immediately caught her limping. Many viewers believed the contact had affected her. What made the situation even more controversial was that it didn't appear to be an isolated incident. Throughout the game, Golden State defenders played an extremely physical style against Clark. She was bumped coming off screens. Her jersey appeared to be grabbed on several possessions. Defenders stayed attached to her hips while fighting through actions. Yet many fans felt the officials consistently allowed the contact to continue without many whistles. Looking back at the opening quarter, supporters pointed to multiple possessions where Clark appeared to be pushed away from her preferred spots without a foul being called. On another play, she became tangled while navigating a screen, fell to the floor, and play continued without a whistle. By the time the collision with Stokes occurred, many viewers believed a pattern had already developed. From their perspective, repeated physical contact had gone largely unpenalized, leaving frustration to build with every possession. Immediately afterward, Clark's body language noticeably changed. She favored the injured leg while jogging back on defense. She appeared reluctant to put full weight on it, and the television cameras captured an expression that suggested she was trying to play through obvious discomfort. It looked like more than disappointment over a missed opportunity. Many viewers interpreted it as a combination of pain and frustration after feeling that the play had gone unaddressed. As emotions rose, Clark made her feelings known to the officiating crew. Broadcasters observed that referee Gerda Gatling allowed Clark considerable room to express her frustration before attempting to move the game forward. That sequence became important because many fans argued the missed call affected much more than a single possession. According to that viewpoint, Clark was forced to continue playing while dealing with a painful leg, making every drive, cut, and change of direction more difficult for the remainder of the night. When a player's lower body is compromised, explosive first steps become harder to generate. Balance can be affected. Even shooting mechanics may change. Supporters argued those factors made it much more difficult for Clark to play at her usual level. According to Clark's explanation after speaking with the officials, she was told the contact had been viewed as something she initiated herself. That interpretation surprised many watching the game. Following the loss, Clark addressed the incident during her post-game press conference. She didn't hide her frustration. Speaking candidly, she said the play left her with a painful leg contusion and added that, in her opinion, the officials should not have missed the foul. Rather than offering a carefully rehearsed answer, Clark made it clear she believed the no call affected her ability to play the rest of the game at full strength. And from that point forward, the controversy surrounding the officiating only continued to grow. Clark doesn't simply shake it off and run back down the floor. Instead, she immediately turns toward referee Gerda Gatling and voices her frustration right there on the court, loud enough for fans sitting near the baseline to notice. The officials issue her a warning, but no technical foul follows. Judging by her reaction, Clark doesn't appear overly concerned about the possibility of receiving one. She wants her point heard. From that moment on, she's clearly battling through discomfort. Every sprint, every cut, and every change of direction seems to put additional strain on the injured leg. Even while dealing with the pain, she continues trying to push the pace, create opportunities for Aaliyah Boston inside, and keep Indiana's offense moving as Golden State continues playing an aggressive, physical brand of defense around every screen. But Clark isn't the only Fever player who would soon become the center of officiating controversy. Attention quickly shifts to Aaliyah Boston. As the game progresses, questions begin surfacing about Indiana's rotation and why Boston, arguably the team's most effective interior presence, spends so much time on the bench during critical stretches. Broadcasters speculate there could be reasons fans aren't aware of. Perhaps Stephanie White likes the lineup currently on the floor. Perhaps the coaching staff is managing fatigue. Or maybe they're simply trying to avoid additional foul trouble before halftime. With both Clark and Boston having missed time this season, conserving energy also becomes part of the discussion. Still, many Fever fans remain puzzled. Why is Indiana's best post player sitting during a game in which the team desperately needs size, rebounding and scoring in the paint? That question grows louder as the first half unfolds. Boston's foul trouble arrives quickly. Her first foul comes on what many viewers consider minimal contact during a post-up, despite similar physical play occurring repeatedly against her without drawing whistles at the opposite end. Before long, she picks up her second personal foul, and the game hasn't even reached the midway point of the second quarter. Faced with the possibility of a third foul before halftime, Stephanie White chooses to send Boston to the bench. Many fans understand the strategic reasoning behind the decision. What they question are the fouls that forced it. To many watching, several of those calls appeared unusually soft. Some supporters argued Golden State players exaggerated contact, falling dramatically after relatively minor collisions, while the officials consistently ruled in their favor. One sequence, in particular, became a major talking point. Boston is boxing out for a rebound with what appears to be routine contact. The opposing player falls to the floor. The whistle immediately sounds. A foul is assessed against Boston. Frustrated, she heads back to the bench, visibly shaking her head after another call she clearly disagrees with. Then many viewers pointed to the other end of the court. Golden State's front court players continue battling Boston physically inside, using their size and length to contest every possession, yet similar contact often goes unpenalized. To many Fever supporters, that contrast represented the heart of the controversy. They believed the game was being officiated differently, depending on which team initiated the contact. That perception extended beyond individual plays. Golden State established its defensive identity from the opening tip. The Valkyries raced out to an early 12-2 advantage by using their length, crowding passing lanes, contesting every catch, and forcing Indiana into difficult offensive possessions. Many fans felt the officials allowed that physical approach to continue throughout much of the night. The early deficit placed Indiana in an uphill battle before Boston's foul trouble had even fully developed. Each time Boston left the floor, Indiana lost its primary low-post scoring option. Without her presence inside, the offense relied even more heavily on perimeter shooting against a defense designed to force exactly those kinds of shots. Boston provides something few others on the roster can consistently offer. Her ability to score around the basket, rebound, and command defensive attention changes the entire structure of Indiana's offense. As a result, every minute she spent on the bench affected more than her personal stat line. It changed the way the Fever were forced to play offensively. Even so, Boston still delivered several impressive moments. One highlight came when Caitlin Clark threaded a beautiful behind-the-back pass that found Boston spotting up beyond the arc. Boston confidently knocked down the three-pointer, sending Indiana's bench into celebration and reminding everyone of the chemistry developing between the two All-Stars. By the final buzzer, Boston finished with 15 points, 7 rebounds, 2 steals, and 3 blocked shots. Those numbers become even more impressive, considering the amount of time she spent on the bench because of foul trouble. Many fans couldn't help but wonder what her final stat line might have looked like had she been able to play uninterrupted minutes, instead of repeatedly dealing with whistles that, in their view, differed from the level of contact being allowed on the other side of the floor. When supporters compare Boston's foul calls alongside Clark's disputed no-calls, it's easy to understand why so much of the post-game conversation centered on the officiating rather than the final score itself. When you compare the no-call on Clark's injured leg with the foul trouble that followed Aaliyah Boston throughout the game, a larger pattern begins to emerge. Many Indiana supporters came away feeling that the Fever's two biggest stars were affected by the officiating in completely different ways. One player appeared to be whistled for contact fans believed was minimal, while the other absorbed heavy contact without receiving the foul calls many thought she deserved. To many viewers, that contrast became one of the defining stories of the night. It also wasn't viewed as a one-game issue. Throughout the season, fans and analysts have repeatedly debated the consistency of officiating in Fever games, pointing to several controversial moments that have sparked discussion across social media and sports television. Despite everything they were dealing with, both Clark and Boston still managed to make important contributions. Clark once again demonstrated that her impact extends well beyond scoring. She stayed active defensively, disrupted passing lanes, forced turnovers, and consistently looked to create open opportunities for teammates. One of the night's highlights came when she patiently navigated a double team before finding Aaliyah Boston for a wide-open basket, showcasing the chemistry that continues to grow between the two stars. By the final buzzer, Clark finished with 13 points, 6 assists, and 3 rebounds. Viewed without any additional context, those numbers appear respectable. But this wasn't an ordinary performance. This was Indiana's primary playmaker, competing while clearly dealing with discomfort after taking a hard shot to her quad earlier in the game. That reality changes the conversation. The question isn't simply whether the stat line was good enough, it's how Clark was able to remain productive despite appearing to play through an injury that affected nearly every movement she made. Her shooting numbers tell another part of the story. She finished 4 of 14 from the field and 1 of 8 from beyond the three-point line. On paper, those percentages resemble an off-shooting night, but many observers believe they look very different when viewed alongside the physical limitations she appeared to be dealing with. Clark's offensive game depends heavily on creating separation with explosive first steps. Every drive, crossover, and pull-up jumper begins with pushing off that lead leg. If that movement is limited, creating clean looks becomes significantly more difficult. Even though she continued finding her preferred spots on the floor and attracting extra defenders, the burst that normally creates space for open jumpers seemed noticeably reduced. As a result, shots that usually come within the natural flow of the offense often became tightly contested attempts. Many fans attributed that difference to the injury rather than poor shooting form. The turnover numbers support a similar conclusion. Clark finished with 4 turnovers. For a player who thrives by constantly attacking defenses and attempting difficult passes, reduced mobility can affect every decision. Her aggressive style relies on the confidence that she can beat defenders off the dribble. When that advantage disappears, passing lanes close more quickly, defenders recover faster, and possessions that typically lead to assists can instead become turnovers. While Clark and Boston dealt with injuries and foul trouble, Sophie Cunningham stepped up, with one of her strongest defensive efforts of the game. She finished with 10 points and 4 steals, repeatedly disrupting passing lanes through anticipation, hustle, and relentless effort. Those defensive plays generated valuable transition opportunities and helped keep Indiana within striking distance during several stretches of the contest. The Fever's supporting cast also contributed enough offensively to prevent the game from getting completely out of reach. Different players chipped in timely baskets that kept the scoreboard respectable, even as Indiana struggled to establish offensive consistency against Golden State's disciplined defensive system. Still, the Fever managed only 75 total points. Against a defense specifically designed to slow Indiana's attack, that level of production simply wasn't enough. As the game entered its later stages, another coaching decision began generating discussion. Kelsey Mitchell remained on the floor for 35 minutes, despite the outcome appearing increasingly out of reach before the fourth quarter was well underway. Many fans questioned that decision in real time across social media. Why continue giving a veteran heavy minutes in a game that seemed largely decided? Mitchell ultimately finished with 20 points, but the timing of her scoring became another topic of debate among supporters. Some questioned whether those late baskets meaningfully impacted the outcome, while others defended the decision as part of normal game management. Meanwhile, Clark, the player many view as the engine of Indiana's offense, was operating under a minutes restriction, while also attempting to play through an apparent leg injury, adding yet another layer to an already controversial night for the Fever. By the closing minutes, the outcome had largely been decided. The game had turned into a comfortable Golden State lead, with very little suspense remaining. As the Valkyries continued controlling the tempo, Indiana struggled to generate the kind of comeback that would make the final stretch competitive. Then Kelsey Mitchell buried another three-pointer, continuing one of her stronger offensive performances of the night. Moments like that immediately sparked another discussion among Fever fans. When you compare the minutes played by Mitchell and Clark, many supporters began asking what priorities the coaching staff was emphasizing in this particular game. Clark spent portions of the fourth quarter on the bench because of a minutes restriction connected to injury management. Meanwhile, Mitchell remained on the floor, despite the game appearing well out of reach. That contrast became another point of debate after the final buzzer. Many fans questioned why Clark's workload remained tightly controlled, while Mitchell continued logging heavy minutes in a game whose outcome seemed increasingly settled. To those observers, it created the impression that one player was being protected, while another was being left on the floor, in circumstances that no longer seemed likely to change the result. As those discussions spread across social media, another criticism emerged. Some fans argued that Indiana's reserve players often brought more energy than the starting offense during stretches of the game. Others questioned whether the rotation choices truly reflected what was happening on the floor. Regardless of where people stood, the minutes distribution became another storyline added to an already controversial evening. The atmosphere changed again once everyone arrived at the post-game press conference. Even before Caitlin Clark fully answered her first question, her tone suggested the frustration from the game had carried over. When reporters asked about the collision involving Kaya Stokes, Clark responded directly. She didn't avoid the subject. She explained that the play resulted in a painful leg contusion and stated that, in her view, the officials should not have missed the foul. Rather than offering a carefully worded response, Clark made it clear she believed the missed call had a direct impact on the rest of her performance. Her comments left little room for interpretation. She expressed frustration, not only with the contact itself, but also with having to continue playing while dealing with the injury afterward. When reporters asked whether the officials had explained the decision, Clark said she was told the contact had been viewed as something she initiated. That explanation clearly did little to change her opinion. From her perspective, she believed the contact should have resulted in a foul regardless of how the sequence unfolded. Stephanie White addressed many of the same topics during her own media availability, but her approach was noticeably different. Rather than focusing on one specific play, White discussed officiating as part of the normal flow of the game and explained that player rotations were designed with long-term health in mind. Comparing the two press conferences, many observers noticed a difference in emphasis. Clark focused on the individual play, the injury, and the officiating decision she believed affected the game. White centered her comments on the broader process, overall strategy, and managing players throughout a demanding season. Those differing perspectives became another talking point among fans following the game. The explanation for Clark's minutes restriction traces back to her recovery from an earlier back injury. Indiana had implemented a plan limiting her workload to help manage her return and reduce the risk of aggravating that condition over the course of the season. Many people understood the reasoning behind that approach while she was working back into full game shape. However, some supporters questioned how that plan applied on a night when Clark had also taken a painful hit to her quad during the game itself. From that viewpoint, the restrictions seemed to create a frustrating situation. Clark absorbed significant contact, continued competing through obvious discomfort, and then still saw her minutes limited because of a pre-existing workload plan that had been established before the in-game injury occurred. During the press conference, Clark acknowledged that she felt she played with better pace and more explosiveness later in the game, despite missing some shots. She also expressed hope that she would soon be able to play more than the current minutes restriction allowed. When asked about the leg contusion, Clark answered with humor, suggesting she would simply treat it and move forward. Even so, the sequence highlighted what many fans viewed as the central frustration from the night. Clark suffered the collision, continued competing through visible discomfort, and then remained subject to the same workload limitations that had been established before the injury occurred. For many observers, that combination of circumstances became one of the biggest reasons why emotions ran so high after the final buzzer, adding another layer to an evening already filled with debate over officiating, player management, and the direction of the Indiana Fever. Meanwhile, Kelsey Mitchell continued looking for her offense well into the closing stages of a game that had already slipped away. That decision only added more fuel to the conversations spreading across fan communities, sports talk shows, and social media. The discussion has grown beyond a single game. Many observers are now questioning whether Caitlin Clark and Stephanie White are simply seeing basketball differently, or whether they're moving in completely different directions when it comes to the future of the franchise. Some analysts have even begun exploring hypothetical roster scenarios, suggesting Indiana could eventually choose to build primarily around Aaliyah Boston and Lexi Hull, while reconsidering the long-term Clark-White partnership. At this point, no one inside the organization has publicly suggested such a move. Clark hasn't. The coaching staff hasn't. Neither has the Fever front office. Still, the fact that those conversations are gaining traction outside the organization shows just how much attention the situation is receiving. So the question becomes this: was this simply another frustrating night, or could it represent the moment when Clark's patience finally reached its limit? If the organization can't find consistent alignment between its coaching decisions, player management, and the development of its franchise star, the outside speculation is only likely to grow louder. When all the noise is stripped away, the basic facts remain. Clark finished with 13 points and 6 assists, despite appearing to play through a painful leg injury. Boston battled foul trouble throughout the evening, yet still managed to produce another strong performance. Indiana ultimately suffered a convincing loss to a Golden State team that successfully imposed its physical style of play for much of the night. The frustration expressed by many fans didn't emerge out of nowhere. It came after watching a controversial no call involving Clark, questioning several officiating decisions throughout the game, debating Indiana's player rotations, and wondering why Kelsey Mitchell continued logging heavy minutes late while Clark's workload remained restricted. Those moments combined to create one of the most discussed Fever games of the season. What do you think? Should Caitlin Clark remain with the Indiana Fever, or would a change of scenery ultimately benefit both sides? Share your thoughts down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this breakdown, be sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our latest coverage, breaking stories, and in-depth analysis from around the WNBA. Thanks for watching, and click the video on your screen now to keep the conversation going. We'll see you in the next one.